And welcome back to the Movie Babble podcast. I am your host, Nick Kush, and this time on the pod, just talking about those pesky Deadites. Evil Dead Rise was recently in theaters and now coming to streaming, and we took the opportunity just to watch a whole bunch of Evil Dead movies and talk about them on a podcast. So joining me here today is Spencer Henderson. What's going on, buddy?
You had the perfect opportunity there to say joining us, because join us is a quote throughout the Evil Dead franchise.
That's true.
Join us, join us.
Last time, what was my intro last time was doing the Mr. T-Pain from the Rocky movies. So, it was only downhill from there. So why not try even to kind of match up with it, I suppose. This was... we kind of wanted to hash out all these movies. I know, Spencer, especially, you love these movies. And Indeed. For me, I think we'll have a fun little... kind of interplay here, because you love these movies. You're definitely more the expert than I am, and this was my first time going through all of these movies, which was really fun for me. I had seen Evil Dead, the original.
Evil Dead. If you say Evil Dead,
that's true.
You're saying another movie.
See, I'm the novice here. You're already we're a minute in, and you're already catching me on my slip ups. But yeah, so I had seen The Evil Dead about a year and a half ago, I think. But other than that, with Evil Dead Rise coming out, I took the opportunity to see all of the rest of these movies, and it was really, really fun. Quite enjoyed it. My hot take, the Evil Dead franchise is fun. That's, I don't know if that's going to be agreed upon and everywhere, but, they're just fun movies. So I guess to start off here, Spencer, I'll kind of bring it to you. How did you come to these movies? What do you love most about them? Kind of give me everything you got.
Okay. Yeah, as a young teenage boy, probably like even maybe preteen, I was a Boy Scout, and at one point, one of my Boy Scout leaders told me and some of my fellow scouts about a film series called The Evil Dead, and how he used to watch them when he was our age, and how awesome and gnarly of movies that they were. So me and some friends went to our local video store back when those existed, in the town of Fruita, Colorado, and we rented the first Evil Dead movie, and then shortly thereafter we went back and rented the second Evil Dead movie. And actually it took me a little while to realize that Army of Darkness was related to the two. Like, this was, at a time where I wasn't scouring IMDb as often as I do these days. And I remember there was this one store called Hastings that was a bunch of movies and media, video games, music, you name it, books. And I came across Army of Darkness there. And I saw that it was like from the case, it was like the classic Army of Darkness poster. It's from the creator of the Evil Dead series, and Bruce Campbell's on the poster. And I was like, what? Is this an Evil Dead movie? And then, it turns out that it was a Evil Dead sequel. And that was when I first watched Army of Darkness. So that was a couple years later, probably like around when I was 14. And so I've been on board with this franchise for a really long time at this point. Like, honestly, if you calculate it up, most of my life. And I remember when the 2013 Evil Dead came out, I was one of the people who was there opening night in the theater. I worked at a theater at the time. I took my girlfriend at the time, who was not happy with me taking her to that movie at all. It's just been a franchise that I have been in love with for a really long time, and I love it. So yeah, that's my history.
Yeah, I definitely kind of share your love for it now that I've seen it, and it is one of those things where, benefits of having a podcast where it's a great opportunity just to watch things you've never seen before, and those were just major blind spots for me, because it is interesting. I feel like maybe not every genre filmmaker, but I guess every filmmaker that loves genre material, like when you talk to them about their favorite movies, all of them talk about Evil Dead 2 as their touchstone. Mm-hmm. I've heard multiple podcasts where Quentin Tarantino is like, yeah, Evil Dead 2 is the greatest movie ever made, or something close to that. So it definitely holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. And it's fun kind of going back and seeing it. You can certainly see why. It really does feel like if you were seeing this for the first time, I think it was at 1987 is when Evil Dead 2 came out. Like it really would be like this kind of like, oh my god, like moment where it's just the camera's flying all over the place.
Yeah.
And there's just so much energy to it. And yeah, it's interesting because I really love Sam Raimi, and obviously his style is very noticeable in all of his movies. But it's just such a blast to kind of see it, I guess, blossom here because Evil Dead, early in his career, he stepped away from the Evil Dead franchise to make a couple other movies in between, and then he came back to Evil Dead 2, or the Evil Dead franchise for Evil Dead 2 a couple years later. And I really feel like this is kind of where he figured it out, I guess, in a mainstream sense, where the camera's just going all over the place. So you can still kind of feel that DIY spirit that really kind of informs a lot of his movies. But yeah, it's just kind of like the great like run and gun. Let's see what we can do with the money we have and figure it out from there. And it's just so much fun. I just really like. It's just really fun to kind of see what I was saying before, the DIY spirit around all of these movies, especially the first three. I guess the Evil Dead 2013 and Evil Dead Rise are very different beasts at this point. But kind of just going back and seeing, one, how like endearingly cheap the first three movies are in some spaces. You can see the seams. That's part of its charm, or most actually. Yep. I would say it is its charm.
Most, yeah.
That's why you love those movies so much, is you can kind of see the quality to them, and you really do see the effort, and that's what makes it so much fun. But yeah, it was really, really funny. I went back and I saw The Quick and the Dead for the first time. Have you ever seen that movie? Sam Raimi's Western.
I actually haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
That's
was on
one
Netflix.
I haven't watched.
Sharon Stone, Gene Hackman, awesome movie. Leonardo DiCaprio's in there. Russell Crowe is in there. It's a really, really fun movie. I looked at. I think it's like it's like in the 50s and Rotten Tomatoes. Not necessarily like a beloved movie, I guess.
Sure.
But I don't know, with Raimi, even when he isn't at his best, or I guess maybe even the stuff that isn't hailed by him, I still kind of love, because it's really goofy and wonderful, and when he can kind of put his own touches on things, it's just the best. Bruce Campbell is my favorite part of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And like a Bruce Campbell cameo is just the kind of par for the course for Raimi and a lot of his stuff, and that's kind of that's like part of what his stamp is, and that just makes me really happy. I like seeing that. So do you have any thoughts on Raimi in general?
Yeah, well, sure. I think at one point we discovered that we're like the same age, so both of us probably grew up, or at least I did, watching the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah,
those were like movies that I loved, like when I was younger. Like I remember seeing them in theaters and being obsessed with those movies, and so I think part of that kind of primed me to be a huge fan of Raimi's style for life, because those movies very much feel like Sam Raimi movies. And so you're talking about the energy of the Evil Dead trilogy that Raimi did. We'll get into the other movies, but I think that is very much connected to Sam Raimi as a filmmaker. So I agree with you. As a filmmaker, like he's like infectious with the style and the kind of feeling of his movies. They just feel so zany and over the top, and at points silly. Like he's not afraid to lean into being really silly in his movies. And I think that that's a huge testament to his power as a filmmaker, that he was able to, like you said, take these movies that did not have massive budgets. They weren't like huge tentpole projects at the time in terms of horror films, like a movie maybe like The Shining that came out right before the Evil Dead came out, like the year before. But he was somehow able to capture like a really distinct vision of a horror film or a horror setup that's now become a cliche, the cabin in the woods. So I think it's he's a great filmmaker. Like I love him, and just like I'm gonna mention this movie probably a little bit later. It's not an Evil Dead movie, but Drag Me to Hell. That's still like one
Yeah,
of my favorite movies, horror movies of like the 21st century so far. Like I think
really
it's
fun movie.
incredible. Yeah, it's awesome. So
Yeah, it's like a really fun combination of like cynicism and Looney Tunes energy. Like I think you said multiple times where he like he loves the Three Stooges, he loves Looney Tunes, and you watch a movie like The Evil Dead 2, and it's like, oh yeah, that that makes sense. Or even Army of Darkness, which is just like a
oh
skit comedy, like most of the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
It's just
Army of Darkness, dude. There's parts where it's a full blown Three Stooges movie.
oh,
Like, it's
and I love it so
yeah, it's
much.
incredible.
It's
It's
so great.
incredible.
We'll get
Yeah,
to that later.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just I. It's such a wonderful blend that it just makes these movies so special. Where he's very okay decapitating people on a whim, but then also like, playing with their head and like making it like do whatever things, or like the big hand set piece where Ash has to cut off his hand and then he's like messing around with it and like it turns into like this really goofy piece where he's fighting his own hand. It's so great, and it's like it really is just, I think, just so inventive. It really is like I think I look at the Evil Dead 2 especially as like what like personal imagination can bring to a really like low budget. And I'm kind of shocked, like more generally, like you have all of like the classic Raimi camera moves, or like the classic when the I guess the Evil Dead is coming for somebody and it's just the camera just zooming really quick and almost chasing people. I'm just like so like you see that and you're like, wow, like I feel like that should have been copied 10 billion different times, and I feel like I don't see that as much as I should.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because they're tough to pull off, and I can certainly see like back then, like you're just like someone running with a camera and just making it really goofy.
Yeah, I think it was like a 2x4 and they strapped a camera to it and just ran through the woods, somebody
Yeah,
on each side. Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
incredible.
So
I love seeing that kind of thing, and it is something that like if I was a filmmaker, which I'm definitely not talented to do that enough, but I would just see a movie like that and like, okay, I'm gonna like copy this in every single movie I make
yeah.
because this camera move is awesome. Um, I guess that kind of just speaks to his skill in general, where it's just they figured it out, and it was like, how can we make this look so creepy and fun with no money? And it's like the simplest thing ever, just you're just running with a camera, but you make it look great when you stage it correctly. So it's just really impressive. You can
Sure.
totally see how like you can see the gears turning. It's like, okay, why did they make that choice? It's always because they had to deal with this kind of obstacle, but they
Mm-hmm.
made it work, and it really is just wonderful. It's
Mm-hmm.
these another interesting kind of topic I had for you. Do you find um, maybe just the first three movies, maybe not Army Darkness, because as we said, that's like basically a comedy, but do you find either the Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 scary?
I'd say that Evil Dead, I think, is the Evil Dead. Sorry, we're gonna keep doing that, but the Evil Dead is the most straightforward horror of the first three. Like, I think there's kind of like a bleakness and almost kind of a mean spirit to that movie
Yeah.
that is absent in the next two. So yeah, I would say that I find Evil Dead one scary, mostly from an atmosphere standpoint, and kind of just like this really dark, bleak movie about a guy basically going to a cabin in the woods and completely having his life completely turned upside down and shattered and everything taken from him,
Yeah.
essentially. So there's kind of a cosmic horror element that I think is really yeah, it's definitely a horror movie. Like I would say more so than a comedy. Like the second movie goes more the horror comedy route, and then Army of Darkness goes even further into the comedy
Yeah.
territory.
I think
So
I agree
yeah.
with you because I feel like kind of coming to these movies later, you have I know I understood how you like the appeal of these movies, but I was like, oh, I wonder if like these will actually scare me. And Evil Dead 2 definitely not, but I'm like loving the entire thing. And it's just so inventive and really really fun. And I kind of agree with you. Like the Evil Dead, I'm probably a little more unnerved by. I think it's like the footage is just so grainy, and that just tends to remind me of like the video nasties or just like a bunch of like
Sure.
60s and 70s movies that are made really on the cheap that just like look
Which
really gross.
which the Evil Dead was a video nasty.
Yeah,
Like it was one. So
yeah,
yeah. But there's like, okay, there's one shot. I think it's Linda. She There's like this shot where she's just sitting like straight up and her eyes are all white and she's smiling like in the background. And it's a terrifying image, I would say. So there's imagery in the first movie that I think is genuinely scary. Like I'd say that you and I are probably two people who watch enough movies where we're a certain level of desensitized. You know what I mean? Like
oh
we don't
definitely,
find things as
absolutely.
scary as yeah. So, but you think of like a normal viewer and you're like, yeah, there would be things I think would be pretty scary and evil. The Evil Dead. So
Yeah, yeah, it is like jumping slightly ahead when you watch something like Evil Dead 2013 or Evil Dead Rise, where those have just leaned into like how can we make these movies disgusting and grimy. And yeah, like you said, like I'm so desensitized. So like when something gross in those movies happens, I'm just like, oh no, that sucks. Like there's almost like
yeah.
there's a withdrawal from it where I'm just like, oh, that's a bummer for that person. I'm just kind of like casually watching it.
Yeah.
I think
Like
more generally, like it is the more like atmospheric and like creeping, like lurking stuff that makes me like more creeped out. Um, so yeah, I definitely agree with like in the Evil Dead, there are like in that setup, there is some like really good stuff like that in there that kind of makes me a little more unnerved. Not to say that there isn't fun to have with the Evil Dead or Evil Dead Rise, but yeah, I typically don't find like what they like the gross out like the gore like fests like those. I don't typically find those very scary.
yeah.
But maybe that's
We'll
just
definitely
me.
get more into it. We'll get more into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll definitely get. There are some scenes, especially in Evil Dead 2013, that are tough, should I say? But yeah, well, why don't we kind of just jump into the Evil Dead from 1981? Um, yeah, like you said, this is kind of the more straightforward of, I guess, the Evil Dead versus Evil Dead 2. Um, it's interesting because obviously this is now a huge cult movie as well. I would say that probably the first two are definitely on a different pedestal than its Army of Darkness, a little below that, even though I would probably put all three of them on the same pedestal personally. Um,
Same.
but I feel like there are two different kinds of cult movies that I really respond to. Um, One is you can kind of see the seams of the movie, or maybe the acting isn't the most amazing. Things like that. You can kind of just see like it's rough around the edges, but the movie isn't. There isn't a self awareness built into the movie, which like The Room is a good example of that movie is completely self unaware, but everything that like Tommy Wiseau has tried to do ever since is just like complete like in on the joke, and it's just like it's nauseating to watch. It's not fun. Um, and I really like the original Evil Dead, from that perspective, where it is not necessarily, it's definitely not in on the joke, but I really appreciate it because it's just kind of going for it with what it has. And that kind of like, like those imperfections kind of lead to indelible images or performances in their own ways. And I certainly like that. Whereas Evil Dead 2 is in on the joke later on, and that kind of creates its own different thing. But yeah, I think broadly, everyone points to Evil Dead 2 as like the movie out of this, but I just really love the Evil Dead. It's really I have a like we there's a very interesting like Ash in the first movie is very much he's one of the group. It kind of reminds me, honestly, weirdly, of Alien, where you have Ripley kind of just one of the group, and then like slowly over the course of the movie she becomes that hero, and then you really buy into it because it just kind of fell
Mm-hmm.
that way. And I feel like Ash functions very similarly in the first movie, where it is very much he's just a guy along with his friends, and then shit hits the fan and he slowly has to kind of take charge at the end, and it kind of works really well for like that hero's arc. So I just it's very endearing in that sense. I just I just really appreciate it. And there's like a lot of thought put into it, even though like as you said, you can see the seams. But kind of what do you kind of like a lot about this movie?
Everything.
Yeah, that wasn't a great question. What do you like
Yeah.
about a really famous movie?
No, I actually like, I find that comparison really appropriate and interesting. Especially, it's really hard for me, like, to view the original Evil Dead series like separate from one another, because I've seen them so many times, and I've had these movies as a part of my life for a while now. So it's like the character of Ash, I have such a specific idea of, because, like, I did watch Evil Dead 2 super early, like not long after I watched the first movie. And if you look at the first movie kind of like in a vacuum or separate from the other movies, it is interesting, yeah, to see that Ash really, he isn't the Ash we like come to know later
Hmm.
through the sequels, as well as Ash versus the Evil Dead. Like that, those become much more about this specific like character, and he's kind of like a big dumb imbecile who somehow manages to be heroic at points. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that really the star of this first movie is Sam Raimi, like
Oh yeah.
himself.
Hmm.
Just because, yeah, it's uh, like, it's really hard to, this movie makes something that is not easy look easy, and that
Oh
is
yeah.
taking a very small amount of resources and making, like, being so creative and inventive that you're able to, like, take something off to a level of um like infamy that is to the point where we're still acknowledging this movie. Like, we're talking about it on a podcast right now.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that the true star of Evil Dead is the creativity and like this kind of zany nature we talk about. Um like the camera movement that you kind of referenced earlier, with like the camera just flying through the forest, like going super fast. And it's like this really, really distinct image that you see. Like that, that's something, like you said, it hasn't been replicated all that much. Like the only movie I can really think of that uses a similar camera technique is Raising Arizona, the Coen Brothers movie, and they
Which is
worked
funny
on this movie
because yeah,
with
because
Sam Raimi.
Raimi,
Yeah,
they're really good buddies. That's funny. Yeah.
yeah. So like there's the shot where Mrs. Arizona realizes her baby is gone, and the camera like is flying like it is in Evil Dead. It's going over cars, it goes up a ladder, and it's like, you would think that an image um that energetic and interesting would have been replicated more. But I really can't think of horror movies that really use that type of, a way to provoke fear in a viewer, or like a sense of dread in a viewer. And it's also like, it just really speaks to Sam Raimi's style, which is very, as I said, zany, energetic. It's influenced by things like we talked about the Three Stooges, and his horror is very physical. That's the other
Hmm.
thing that you notice in these movies is like, there's like ashes getting thrown through like walls and windows, and shelves are falling on him, and there's so much to these movies that are slapstick, but it's in a way that I think it does lean into the horror genre, where there's uh, rivers of blood drenching characters and all of that. I think it's like such a cartoonish horror movie that I think that I'm somebody who I respond to like fun in horror. Like, I like
Yeah.
when horror movies are fun. I can also like a horror movie when it's really relentlessly bleak and cruel and upsetting. But my favorite horror movies tend to be more in the spirit of like Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, that are very, they lean into their atmosphere. They're unapologetically horror throughout, and they're not ashamed of that at all. Like, there's no shame in being like, we're a really silly horror movie. about Deadites corrupting and picking these people off one by one.
Yeah.
And one more thing, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say no. Finish up.
Well, one more thing I wanted to say is that I think it was I was listening to the Blank Check podcast, I think it was.
Yep.
And one of the hosts of that show, he said something really interesting that I've loved this quote ever since I heard it. He said that, and it might have been originally from like Sam Raimi or somebody else, but most horror movies are about a bunch of characters who go and get picked off one by one. And this movie is about one character who gets like picked on the entire movie by the Deadites and the other characters. That's just such a great way to describe this movie. I feel.
It's so true. I think it's, I think the special sauce for all Evil Dead movies, kind of in perpetuity, as long as they want to keep making these, is you just gotta put people in front of the camera that are just down for whatever. Like they have to be, like you said, they have to be like dumped with buckets of blood. They have to just be like writhing around on the floor like crazy people, throw themselves in the walls. Like they kind of just have to be up for whatever. And I think in the Evil Dead, that's part of just the kind of the, like what we were saying, like the DIY spirit of that era of film, where it's like, all right, we're just gonna throw stuff like literally at the wall and see what happens. And I think that's kind of something that the spirit that they've somewhat kind of held throughout all of these movies, which I appreciate. And it's just, I just find the first Evil Dead so charming, and how it's it's a very earnest movie, and kind of how it approaches everything. And it's fun just kind of seeing all these tropes being created before your very eyes. And it kind of works in that earnestness, obviously, because it's kind of creating all of these things that have kind of informed horror ever since. And yeah, it's just, I feel like the original Evil Dead, I don't have a ton to say about, like, for like each specific part of it, because I think it's the one where it's obviously the cheapest, and I'm just so amazed that like this is what they made out of it, that I'm just like, I just love every bit of this. And I love seeing all the stop motion puppets and whatnot. Or like like some of the effects when the like when the demons are falling apart and it's just like foam looking like blood or whatever. It's so wonderful. And I kind of like a lot of these demons, they're otherworldly, so the fact that they look kind of fake or whatever, it's like, oh, who cares? It's not like they're trying to replicate something that's super real in this world. Can't say I've ever come across a Deadite in my life, but that's just me. But yeah, these movies, just like this original one, it is kind of one of those unimpeachable things where I'm like, yeah, I don't really. It's kind of like Jaws. Like, what is there to say about the Evil Dead? It's like, I feel like it has been picked apart so many times, and it's so lovely. I feel like it's like a warm blanket, weirdly, to me when I watch it.
Yeah, no, same. And like you kind of saying, I don't think any of these movies we really need to talk about the plot, because if you and I were to go over the plot, it's like basically, oh, this guy and his friends go to a cabin in the woods and crazy shit happens. So like the movies can literally be summed up to that. And it's not about the story, it's about like the way the story is told. Right. And so I think the technique of the movie is the much more interesting thing to talk about.
Yeah.
So
do you have a favorite moment from the first Evil Dead that you want to mention?
Well, like the scene that kind of cracks me up the most is the scene where the shelf falls on Bruce Campbell, and he's like, you can tell it's made of like plywood, and he's like really struggling to like lift it up. And in reality, it would be like the easiest thing to just like pull right off of you, especially a man of like Bruce Campbell's size. Like you're like, that shelf definitely wouldn't be this difficult for him to pull off of him. But no, in terms of just like individual scenes, like, I don't know, like I think that the movie overall, it just and like I think the second movie is much more like the movie where there are individual scenes that really stick out to me, like, because that's the one that really leans into the style, and they had a way bigger budget, so it like just the first movie more so is like this really kind of dread inducing experience. So I don't really have like a I guess, a favorite scene from the first movie. I just love the whole thing. And I love like the things that it sets up for later in through that return throughout the franchise, like the recording of the man who, is like in like what do you call it, studying the Book of the Dead, and then like his recording so eerie and his voice is so like distinct, like the way he's
Yeah,
like saying like Kandarian
yeah,
demons and
it's
all
really
that, like it's
good.
just so, yeah, it like really sets a great vibe for the movie. So yeah, no, not really a favorite scene, like I'm sorry, like
Yeah, no, I'm kind of
I
with
love
you.
it all. Yeah.
I am kind of with you where it's, I can pick out, I love the hand set piece in The Evil Dead 2, or I like him when his evil double and him are still attached at the waist down in Army of Darkness, and they're kind of fighting each other. It's just like
Yeah.
I love that scene. Like there isn't like there are obviously like scare set pieces like I guess the infamous Vine scene, which is tough, stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, it is kind of just like, yeah, like you said, just crazy stuff happens in the cabin. That's also Evil Dead 2, but it definitely has its own little take on it. So you can kind of have these little
Yeah,
memorable moments with it.
the tone of the second does feel kind of different. But that tree scene, yeah, like you said, it's very infamous. I know Sam Raimi has like voiced he regrets putting that
Yeah.
into the movie. And that's the one scene of the movie that I would say, yeah, it feels like cruel in a way that the
Very
rest of
so,
the
very much
movie
so.
doesn't. Yeah, it feels more in line with the newer movies, which we'll get to. So
Yeah,
yeah.
well, Fede Alvarez, I wouldn't say is necessarily a warm director when you look at his
Really?
filmographies. So yeah, shocking, right? So yeah, he took that and ran with it. Yeah, he's kind of said as much. It was like, yeah, that was kind of just, we were trying to figure out what we could throw into this movie, and like, yeah, he's like, yeah, it's
He's like
obviously
the tree rape's my favorite scene from the
yeah,
original
Fede
Evil Dead
Alvarez
movie.
is.
He'd be saying that if
He's
you
like,
asked him.
that's what got me into movies to this day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I do appreciate that too, where that's part of like, you have people with a camera and you're figuring stuff out so on the fly, like that's just, it's, I appreciate him kind of looking back on it with that kind of perspective as well. So yeah, like it's, in so many ways it's just, it's imperfect, but I just kind of do, I really do love kind of the care that you really can see in it. It's the original Evil Dead, and I guess maybe 2 and 3 as well. It is that kind of movie where like this movie would never get made again, just because if it was made now, it would look too sleek, and that would get rid of kind of the personality of the movie as well. So it really is kind of like a snapshot in time when you watch it, and I kind of really appreciate that. But yeah, it's funny because let's move on to Evil Dead 2. But the funny part about that is it's kind of the same movie. I mean, it's hilarious because he's so at the beginning of Evil Dead 2, whereas the Evil Dead, it's just there's a group of friends. This time it's just Ash and Linda is played by a different actor, which is just very funny to me. They're like, yeah, we know it's the same, but don't worry about it. And it's funny because the story goes that Stephen King loved the original Evil Dead and wrote like a really famous review about it, and that's how it became like a big deal at Cannes and kind of created like jump started its cult fandom.
Mm-hmm.
So then for a while they were working on the sequel to this movie, and Raimi kind of went away to make Crime Wave, I think his second feature, and he was struggling kind of with just getting funding for this movie. And then eventually, I guess Stephen King got wind of that, and it was like he called up Dino De Laurentiis, the famous producer, said like, you need to give these people money for this movie. And then there was a whole thing where originally Evil Dead 2 was supposed to be the Army of Darkness plot, or more or
Yep.
less. But then Dino De Laurentiis was like, all right, we can make Evil Dead 2 only if it kind of is basically the same movie as the original, but here's more money to do it. And then so they were like, oh, okay. And then we get this wonderful, just beautiful little thing that I will cherish for forever. Yeah, the Evil Dead 2 is just, it really rules. It's like immediately from the beginning you have Ash, who's like this like buffoonish but really earnest and sweet guy in the beginning, or in the first one. Now he's like cracking jokes to to Linda.
Yeah.
He's like the Bruce Campbell's chin's just going crazy. And he's like, he's just talking about having sex and drinking some champagne, and then he walks into the room and here's the recording. Which is it's the funny thing about that though is that the champagne bottle is just out on the table. So when you think about the construction of that, like he would have had to place it there, so he would have noticed the recorder like previously. Like he wouldn't have stumbled into the room to like oh, what does this recorder do? Like as if like champagne is like just stored in like a weird study area of a house. It's a very funny little scene, but obviously it doesn't really matter much. But yeah, then it's just there's kind of no beating around the bush, and it's just craziness happens within the first 3 minutes of this, and that's kind of what I love about this entire. Well, I guess especially 2 and 3, because there's this kind of like a lead in the original Evil Dead, but Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are both less than 90 minutes. I think Evil Dead 2 is 85, and Army of Darkness is like 80 or 81, and it's like all right. Crazy stuff's happening in the first minute. Let's get to it. We don't need a whole boring first act to kind of set up characters. Like let's just like fly into it from there. And then it's just the Bruce Campbell show for like 80 minutes, and it's the most wonderful thing. I guess overarching thoughts. What kind of sticks out to you about Evil Dead 2?
Yeah, this is a movie that literally every time I watch it, I am just like the entire time telling myself it's the best movie ever made. Like, I there's literally nothing I don't love about this movie. Like, I have zero complaints. Like, it's one of the only movies that I watch where I'm like, I don't know if I would change a single frame of this entire thing. Like, it's so distinct in its tone and its feeling. And this is like truly the most Sam Raimi movie that ever Sam Raimi. Like it's and it comes down to kind of you kind of started this thread with the last movie's discussion, but this guy just loves to beat the absolute shit out of Bruce Campbell. Like he just punishes the living hell out of him. And Bruce Campbell is like so committed to what he
Oh,
is doing as
absolutely.
like his physical performance in this movie in every scene. Like because his character Ash is in like every single frame of this movie. Like
Yep.
we're with him the entire time, and he is just getting like the absolute living hell beaten out of him in basically every single scene. His character's getting maimed and injured throughout this movie, and he's just like it's so much fun to watch. And yeah, like the recap, I guess, at the beginning of the movie, I think I remember reading that it's because like they didn't have the rights to the footage of the first movie, so they kind of had to like quickly recap it. But I think like you said, it does not overstay its welcome, and it doesn't like keep the movie from getting started like immediately. Basically, like as soon as that, I guess, yeah, little recap is over, we are in the movie for the rest of the runtime, and it only keeps getting more progressively crazier and crazier. But this is the movie that I think of when I think of this series. Like because
Yeah.
it's the comedy is so specific, and it once again speaks to the talent of Raimi as a filmmaker, because I think he almost nobody could make this movie and have it feel the way that this movie feels, like have it work. Anyone else would like with it wouldn't work in the same way that it does with this type of style. I think the context of him and Bruce Campbell being like these old time friends, it adds a
Yeah.
charm to the movie that I think is like really cute and endearing. Like you said that the first movie to you kind of feels like a warm blanket. That's kind of how this movie feels to me as well as the first movie. And so yeah, it's just like in your letterbox review of the first movie, you say that it's one of the most infectious movies ever made. And that's how I feel about this one. Like I literally just
Yeah.
feel like I am just infected with joy when I watched this movie. So yeah, it's amazing.
God, I didn't know my letterbox reviews would be making guest appearances on this podcast. That's great.
Like I said, I stalk your letterbox. Just
Well,
hit and refresh.
now everybody knows. Now everybody, yeah, I'm just like cranking out reviews as we do this podcast. Um, yeah, it's. I guess is this the time where we have the Bruce Campbell conversation? Because I love that man. He is just so lovely. Like you said, he is just giving it his all in every single scene, and it is so
And
funny.
he doesn't need to go as hard as he does in this
No,
movie. And
but I thank
yeah.
him for everything
Oh
he
yeah,
does.
for sure, for sure.
Like he is such a live wire. It is just like the way that like you don't know like what's gonna happen to him like because of how crazy the movie is. You also don't know what he's gonna do next, which is just wonderful. It's like truly every bit of this movie. You're like I don't like he could be like he could do anything. I don't know who's to say. And like yeah, like I think you said like the physical performance is obviously such a big deal of it because he's like he has a there's like a bit of like theatrical like performance like stage acting to it where he's
Sure.
like very it's very pronounced and over the top because like he's like he's acting to the cheap seats and the physical nature of it where he is just like flipping himself on the floor like when he's like fighting his hand he like does like a somersault on the floor and he's like fighting himself and like crashing into things it's just it takes a like I think a lot of that probably does do with like having trust in your friend Raimi because you know like that's just not things people do with in movies you know like it's very they're very careful or they're gonna like just not they're gonna avoid doing stuff like that but you know he's with his best friend so he's like all right I'll go through a wall it's almost like the energy you would have like if you like had a few drinks with your buddies and it's like all right like what can we do kind of thing what can we do here he is just you know like I think a lot of people talk about his chin for obvious reasons because it's magnificent. But you know,
Uh-huh.
his eyebrow acting, I think is
Yeah.
so wonderful. You know the eyebrow raises that he does, especially in Army of Darkness when he's you know the sword and sandal hero.
Right.
It's just like he is going crazy with all of his mannerisms in that movie. But here too, it's just he is just like I said, he's a live wire. It is so funny. It make like I watch a movie like this and I'm like, how is this person not in every single movie? Like similar to what we were talking about with like the camera moves, like how are they not in every movie? How is like every great filmmaker look at this movie and like not cast Bruce Campbell in something, which is you know, obviously he's gone to have a great career. He acts in like 5 different movies every single year. That's not to say he's not working anymore, but um yeah, he just like he truly is like a one of one. Like he has such a wonderful personality on screen that like I guess maybe it's too indelible to Evil Dead 2 at this point, you know, or like I don't know why. I don't know why he wasn't picked up for other like really famous movies. Like I'm just shocked. Like obviously he has the Evil Dead franchise, but I'm shocked he didn't have some other kind of like big franchise tied to him or that he played a part in too.
Yeah. This is I feel like this is kind of the route that for this movie and Army of Darkness, the conversation is gonna go is like the movie star discussion.
Yeah.
Because it's like there is a quality that you either like have or you don't, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, as a movie star. Like it's like there are people who are actors and then there are movie stars. And like there's a very rare time where they can kind of like be both like a great actor and a movie star. And Bruce Campbell is like a movie star. You know what I mean? Like he just
Absolutely.
has that quality to him that you you really like can't take your eyes off of this guy when he's like in it when especially this movie and Army of Darkness. And so he's just has such this distinct feeling to him that is and the how committed of an actor he is in a movie that once again this is like still a lower budget movie in the scheme of like the big movies that were being released in 1987. I just like really admire him as an actor because he's so committed to his craft and to like every performance that he does. And I agree with you. It's like I do find myself sometimes thinking, why wasn't Bruce Campbell like the biggest like movie star ever. Like why was why wasn't he like Superman or something like that?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, he's like conventionally like a very good looking guy. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, he's handsome,
you
yeah.
know, that's like I guess part of it is, you know, like were these movies like the most successful thing in the world during their time? No, not really. So maybe that's part
Yep.
of it. Like Army of Darkness is like infamously like a flop, like very
Yep.
much so. So I think that also plays a big part of it too. But yeah,
Yes.
like like if you know, like again, if I was a director, I would just see that guy like he like has the energy that like no one else can, and I want to add that into my movie somehow if I can. But you know, he's Ash, did an amazing career at that, so it's like he's famous to a lot of people, so I guess he would probably have no issues with kind of his career from his perspective. But yeah, he just like it really is like it just seems like it's two guys just holding this movie together. It's Ash, and then it's just Sam Raimi behind the camera. Um, and yeah, like just some of my favorite parts in here are just tremendous. Like I think the first time that that the camera, or I guess the Evil Dead is like chasing Ash throughout the entire house, and he is just like crashing through all
Dude.
of the rooms. He goes in between the walls,
Yeah, like the secret
yeah,
passage through the
right.
wall.
I'm like,
Like, oh,
what? Like, where's this? Like, I didn't know that would exist. But
yeah, it's
it is just
incredible.
so amazing to watch that. Like, I watch something like that, I'm like, holy shit, movies are awesome. Like, that is just such a cool and kinetic scene. Um, and you know, like that. I think that, and you know, him just saying groovy when he turns on the chainsaw. I think are just two of my favorite things ever. Like, I could watch them on an endless loop. They're so good. Um, I just. How about you? Do you have any favorite moments that you want to share?
That I mean, for me, it has to be the hand scene.
The hand scene, yeah, this
Like
too is so good.
in terms of like physical performances, I like feel like that's up there on like the Mount Rushmore of like physical performances
Yeah,
in scenes. And it's like so funny. Like when the hand is like detached, it's like flipping him off in corners, like
yeah.
all that stuff. It's just like that. I love all of that stuff so
He's
much.
shooting it with a
But
shotgun when it's been between the
yeah,
walls.
yeah,
It's
it's
so
so
good.
amazing. But like the where he's like his hand is like pushing him on the ground and he's like laying
Yeah,
motionless, but he's like yeah sliding on like once again it's like I think it's what the physical act that he's doing is actually quite difficult, but he's making it look like really easy and effortless and
oh
convincing.
yeah,
And yeah, I just like I find all of that so well executed from both a filmmaking standpoint and from a performance standpoint. So yeah, they're just like this is like one of those movies where both the the lead performance and the technique of the film are so well blended that they just concoct something that truly like is transcendent as a piece of filmmaking.
yeah. And I love how um, I feel like some movies when they have like a very silly moment like that, I feel like they're very kind of quick to move on or kind of go on to the next beat. But this one, it's like that whole hand scene is like a solid 10 minutes, maybe
Yeah.
10-15 minutes. Like it is just going and going. Yeah, you you watch him just like get pulled across the ground, and then yeah, he's shooting at it with shotgun shells through the wall, and then it leads to the blood dripping through the wall, and then him just getting sprayed, and it's just so great. It just the really I love how kind of specifically in this movie where the Evil Dead kind of I guess I don't know the backstory. I don't even know how to describe it. Like they're just it's not very well explained, but that's to the movie's like benefit where they can kind of allow like the craziness to be whatever form it wants to be. So one moment it's a hand, one moment it's just like spraying liquid or like then it turns black and then it comes on the next thing. Like it just can be whatever it wants to be, and it was kind of just
Yeah.
like whatever they could think of was a fun idea on set. Um, Kind of just ruled the day. So it's so fun. Like I look at that like that hand scene. Like I don't even know how like they pulled it off. Like him dragging it across the floor. Like I guess like they had like a rope or something. Just like had him like
Yeah, dude, I have no
yeah.
clue.
Or you see stuff where it's the like the smoke in the ground. It's like going back in. Like there was a fog machine that was hit by some moss, and they just like shot it and like did it in reverse.
In
And it's just
reverse,
really
yeah.
fun. Like they do that with the blood too, and it's just stuff like that. I'm just like, oh, I kind of love figuring out how. I mean, there's some times where it's like, oh, they just shot that in reverse, but it still looks sick. And then there's other times where I'm like, I have no idea how they did that, but it's just, I guess like the inner like person, like inner artist in me is like, oh, how did they pull that off? Like, it just seems like a really fun problem solving exercise.
And then like the giant like practical creature puppet thing at the end, it's so like it's so well detailed, and it's only in the movie for like a minute maybe.
Yep.
Like it's like not in the movie for a whole long amount of time, but the detail on it, and like it's creepy looking, and it's like the scale of it feels big. It's just like it's so this is a movie that like literally every scene I could just be like, oh, that's my favorite scene, and then it gets to the next scene, I'm like, no, that's my favorite scene, when they're all like laughing at him, or no, my favorite scene is when he attaches the chainsaw to his hand. Like there's just so many great, this is a movie that's like filled with great scenes because every scene is great. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love with like the monster at the end, like they warp its face too, to even like, I feel like that's like a good, it's like one makes it look creepy, but also like maybe hides like the puppet of it all a little bit,
Sure.
you know, just like to mess around with it a little more, and just so like I like this, make this warped image I really love. Yeah, it's just it's really fun. Like there are so many movies too, kind of thinking about the plot dynamics of this movie. So you, in the first movie, it's just a group of friends in the cabin, and this time it's just the, like, what is it, the historian trying to get to the house with Guy, Flock of Seagulls Guy, and then they come along the I guess the country bumpkins or whatever, where it's spitting tobacco, and a lot of times like there are so many movies where it's like a 2-track story where it's like all the craziness is happening in one place, and it's like the other piece of it is like the people trying to get there somehow. And I love how
Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, exactly. Well, except in that situation, it's like 10 different storylines, and it's
just
the worst. There's like
too much. Yeah,
there's
way too much.
250 characters in that movie for whatever reason. And so, but with this movie, it's like I don't even know what the blonde haired guy's name is. Like he's just kind of Guy, you know. And a lot of other movies, I'd be like, well, there's no character development there or whatever. Like they didn't even try. But this movie, it's like, it doesn't matter. We like, what's the point? Like we have 85 minutes here. Like you didn't come here for that guy's backstory, and we know exactly that.
No,
you know?
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
So it's a bit of like a Shaggy plot, I guess, in that sense. But it's like, and the movie knows exactly, like, we know that you're not here for these people. They're gonna don't worry, like, well, they'll get there eventually, and we'll figure it out from there. But we're gonna cut back to Ash for the fun stuff.
Right.
So I really appreciate that, where I think it knows the conventions of storytelling that it's like kind of using, because that's like a pretty easy like get the group together kind of story dynamic. But I appreciate that it's not like we have to take this seriously, or this has to be like the most fleshed out thing ever, because something like the Evil Dead 2013, there's so much backstory about like a traumatic like family and like drug abuse, and it's like that you tried something, but I don't know if I care. So I appreciate like maybe the lack of effort. I don't know how to describe it, or concerning their effort for the monster
like
stuff.
Knowing it knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't try to do more than it should. How I would say.
And it really just kind of uses its moment. It uses all time correctly, and it's like, you know what, we have something with this Bruce Campbell guy, we're going to put the camera on him instead. It's just really great. You have anything else about this movie before we move on to part 3?
Let's move on.
Great. It's funny, so you think of the end of Evil Dead 2, and he gets sucked through the black hole vortex into the Middle Ages, and then he's just like he's just screaming at the people, or like they call him like their master or whatever, because he shoots the dead out of the air with a shotgun, and he's screaming. And it's funny because you make me watching these for the first time back to back to back. I'm like, oh, I would love to see that sequel. And then obviously Army of Darkness turns into that, and it's funny because it's like it like leads into that sequel, but then also the sequel has like basically no bearing on anything that came before it. Like it is very much its own thing. Like it's just like you said, it's like just a full blown comedy. It's a sword and sandal satire.
Yep.
But it's just funny to see like there's like a lot, there's so much connective tissue there where it truly does just set up the movie. And then the sequel's like, we're just gonna do our own thing with it and have fun with it. It's just if you gave me a few drinks, I would dare say I might like Army of Darkness the most of all these movies. I think it's such a wonderful movie. Like I said previously, where they wouldn't make these movies anymore. Army of Darkness truly would not be made anymore. Like this movie is so
no way.
Like so silly and like so like pretty high concept in terms of like what it's satirizing. It's they took a swing with it, and I love that like this horror franchise decided to be like, let's just do a goofy sequel and see what happens. I think that's so funny. As someone who is not super precious of like, I don't know, like franchises or like just like if you just drop random things from movie to movie, like I don't really care about that stuff. I'm not precious about it. Part of the reason why the Marvel Cinematic Universe just like makes my head spin, because it's like, oh yeah, I have to remember that thing that happened 5 movies ago because that'll pay off in Avengers 25, and it just feels like homework. But here it's like, I don't know, like who cares? Like let's have fun with it. Like we know you like the Ash movie, you like the Deadite stuff, so we'll just do that and create a whole new thing around it. But yeah, what are some of your kind of overarching thoughts about Army of Darkness?
Yeah. I feel like this movie is probably like part of the reason why I agree with you, where it's like I don't I don't really hold like, oh, narrative consistency to like sacred levels of like, oh,
Right.
you need to pay off, the Tesseract in the Avengers, that and how it relates to Captain America, the first Avenger or whatever, like all that
Right.
stuff, I literally couldn't give a shit less about. Like it doesn't matter to me. All I want is with this type of franchise, I just want to see like crazy and entertaining shit. Like that's all I care about, and they know that that's all a viewer really should care about. And so this is the movie that I feel like it he like leans the most into the type of stuff that he loves. Sam Raimi, that's who I mean
Yeah.
by he. So this one is the most slapstick of the bunch. Like there's like the whole entire like portion of the movie where he's like in that house and there's all the mini versions of Bruce Campbell,
That's so
and it's
good.
like it becomes a straight up like slapstick comedy for the next like 10 minutes of the movie, and it's like one of the most amazing detours I've ever seen in a movie in my entire life. And then like this is the one that I feel like really gives you the most in terms of Ash's character, which is that he's basically, this kind of bumbling moron who's also kind of a raging asshole, but he's like he has like moments of heroism. Like the whole entire movie, he's just like verbally berating these people who are
Yeah.
surrounding him. He's calling them like stupid imbeciles, and like he thinks he's like so much smarter than them, and he is like barely smarter than them, and that's like kind of like the joke of the movie.
Yeah.
And I love how the movie is constantly like winking at the viewer with like some of the like just shit going down. And I also like this movie on like a technical level, I also find like really impressive. Like it's one of those movies that you watch, you're like, that did not need to go like as hard as it did in
Yeah.
its final set piece, where there's like all these like stop motion like characters and figures, and it's like
That's
you're
so
like, this
great.
had to have
So
taken
great.
so long to
Yeah.
execute. And they didn't need to go that direction. Like they didn't have to make the decision, oh, let's make the villains of this movie skeletons. And the other great thing about this movie is the way that Bruce Campbell like plays both Ash and then like the big bad villain of the movie, who
Yep.
is just like, evil man McEvil. Like he doesn't like have any sort of a backstory. It's literally just, this guy is evil and that's all that matters about him. Like it's so awesome. Like the only complaint I have about this movie, honestly, is they were originally going to call this movie Medieval Dead, and I think that that's a much better
That's
title. Like,
that's a pretty good title.
yeah,
That's
it's a
really, really
brilliant
good.
title. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
So,
Like, you speak about retconning stuff. Like at the end of Evil Dead 2, even though it does set up Army of Darkness, like he's like crowned king, and then at the beginning of Army of Darkness, he's a slave. It's like, oh, they just they were like, we can't start the movie with him being the hero or the savior.
yeah,
It has to lead to that. So
yeah,
like, don't worry about that. Which I'm like, that's fine with me. I don't care. I don't care at all. It's just, yeah, like you said, he's just like this, like he is the bumbling idiot who's like actually like the savior of everybody, and it's such a funny, like, you think about like Jason and the Argonauts, or like all of like those like old time stop motion like adventure movies where it's like the big hero's journey, and this movie is just like, yeah, we're gonna do that, except like we're gonna have way more fun with it and like play with it a lot, and it's gonna be so much fun. I love how, I can't even remember the actress's name, but kind of like the like she plays the woman that falls in love with the hero in all of these movies, and he just shows up and she's immediately in love with him for no reason. And it's one of those things where like they catch the tone so perfectly, because it's just like, that's exactly the point. It's like she's supposed to be a cardboard cutout and be nothing, because that's just, they're making fun of that convention where
that type of
there has to be
movie.
the
Yeah,
woman, there has to be the woman that the savior falls in love with, just because there has to be the damsel. I think that was just so funny. And one of my other favorite moments, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but one of my favorite moments is in the final fight, when they're getting set up. They're doing the classic, let's get the army ready before the villains come. And they open up the car that got sucked through the portal, and he takes out the book that reads Chemistry 101.
yeah, it's so
Then he
amazing.
teaches them how to make gunpowder.
Yeah,
and all other explosives, and it is just, like, I was laughing so hard. It's like the hardest I've laughed in a movie in a really long time. Just that you open up the trunk and it's just prominently placed Chemistry 101. It's like, oh great, this is wonderful.
it's incredible.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
so funny. Yeah, I think I love kind of like movies that are kind of like they're like, yeah, let's just see what happens, throw stuff at the wall. Like, I think this has a lot more, like we said, like it's a slapstick comedy. It has a lot more in common with like a Zucker Brothers comedy than anything else.
Yeah,
It feels like a Top Secret, or one of the like those kind of like an Airplane. Like, it is just like a goofy like jokes, like a joke every second kind of thing. And yeah, like I guess like the best part of the movie to me is definitely the little tiny Bruce Campbells that eventually turn into big evil Bruce Campbell, and then turns into the big bad. It is just, it's so funny, because it's like as the carryover from Evil Dead 2, like this is just Bruce Campbell just like throwing his body around with reckless abandon, and he's just, they have like the, I guess like the prosthetic him attached at the hip to him, and he's just like flailing and doing his best to make it look real, and it is so funny, and I love it so much. And I love that that's like basically like the main plot driver of the movie, is like he's on his trek to find the Necronomicon, and he just like gets in trouble and creates an evil version of himself, and that's like basically the movie. I think that's so funny. It's such like a lark to me that I love it so much.
yeah. So I think what's fun, like really fun about these first three movies, is that from The Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2, you have like this quite a big tonal shift. And then from Evil Dead 2 to Army of Darkness, it's like you have an even bigger tonal shift. So,
Definitely.
like, this franchise is one of the most, like, every movie feels completely distinct from the one that came before it.
Mhm.
Like the vision, the type of tone that it's trying to capture, like the only thing that feels really consistent to me is like the style. Like even Ash's character from the first movie to this movie, he's undergone a like evolution or a metamorphosis that feels he's like a completely different person by the third movie.
Yep.
And this is the movie I feel like that like where the first or the second Evil Dead, you're like, oh yeah, this guy is a movie star. This movie feels like the movie star vehicle for
Yep.
Bruce Campbell. Like it felt like Sam Raimi was really trying to be like, oh, this guy, he is like, if it would have been a huge success, Bruce Campbell potentially could have been like, you know, the next big like movie star actor who was
Definitely.
in all of these movies that, you know, me and you are like speculating, why isn't Bruce Campbell the biggest thing on the planet? And it's probably because of the box office returns of this movie, which we could, you know, speculate on endlessly. But at the end of the day, I just find this movie to be like an absolute blast, like from beginning to end. And it like every time I watch it, I am just like stunned all over again how like batshit insane it is. At like every turn, it's making the most insane choice that it
Mm-hmm.
possibly could. And that's like I think that that's one of the things that why people like you and I would like viewers like you and I are like, oh yeah, this movie like on a given day, I might say that this is my favorite one of the franchise. So
Yeah, it's so funny that like I said, that this movie hinges, like the plot of this movie hinges on like two jokes basically. One is that whole sequence with him just like messing around with like little versions of himself, and then I guess growing the evil version of himself. The other one is just him forgetting the words that he's
just
supposed to
forgetting the
say.
words, which is the best, dude. That is like the best like way to escalate the plot that they could
Yeah,
have possibly come up with. I feel like, yeah, it's
it's so
awesome.
because like it's in so many of these like hero's journey movies, like the hero unwittingly brings on like the apocalypse, or like makes the villain stronger, then they have to make up for it in the end, and like do this whole thing about how they learn from the mistakes, and that's how they become like the hero. And here it's just like, I forgot the words, oops. I brought on the apocalypse.
And the best part is Ash is such an asshole to the person who's like, you need to make sure you remember these words. And he's basically like, you dumb like idiot, I'm gonna remember the words. Like he like straight up like verbally berates this person because he's so certain in himself that he's gonna remember the
Yeah.
words. And then he ends up being the idiot who forgets the words. It's so good. Like
Yep.
I love
Hail
it.
to the king, baby. It's just great.
Yeah, can we talk about the ending of it? Because originally it was supposed to like have Ash like Rip Van Winkle sleep way into the future, and he like wakes up in a post-apocalyptic like Mad Max-esque type of future. So they were setting up to for an Evil Dead 4 that was going to be in like the post-apocalyptic times. And then the ending they went with obviously was the I can't think of the name of the store.
S Mart.
I want S Mart. I wanted to say Quickie Mart, but that's the Simpsons. Like so I was way
Yeah.
off. But yeah, no, the S Mart ending. And I kind of wish we would have got that original ending just because that sounds so awesome.
It
And
sounds amazing. Yeah.
yeah, like if the franchise had gone that direction, but I still do like the S Mart ending. Like I think it's really fun and hilarious. So
Yeah, and especially because they're like, all right, you weirdo, like stop talking to me, and then he has to actually kill a deadite, and it's really funny. It's really great comedic timing. I really
yeah,
like it, and he still has like the scars on his face.
it's
So
incredible.
when people are like, when he's talking about it, people are like, oh my god, this guy's just like a crazy person. Like, it's really really good. Yeah, there's just it's so many little touches. It's not precious about anything that's come before it, which I think is like the most endearing quality. I think honestly that makes me feel like this movie has more reference for what came before, you know, because it's very much like the entire series is like flying by the seat of the pants and seeing what sticks. So here, them kind of doing that similar thing, but now with a budget and just saying like, "Hey, we'll
Yeah,
see what happens." That does feel more in line with if they tried to like connect all the dots and like bring everything, like tie everything back. That the I guess the soft reboots try to do, where they try to like call back to those things with like a lot of additional reverence to them. And Raimi in these movies are like, that was fun. That was a fun little lark we did in the last movie, but we're gonna move on and do something else silly. So I just really appreciate that energy. It's just like it's so much fun.
Hmm.
But yeah, we'll move on from there. Which, speaking of these soft reboots, so we had so many years kind of go by between Evil Dead stuff out in the ether, and then we have the soft reboot, prequel, sequel, whatever thing. They dropped they did the Social Network. They just
It's cleaner, yeah.
yeah, they just called it Facebook. So we have Evil Dead 2013 with Fede Alvarez, as we mentioned at the top, at the helm of this one. And you know, it's I'm not the first person to say this, but you know, this movie definitely misses that Raimi charm. It's like we also mentioned, you know, Fede Alvarez is he's I would call him a sadistic filmmaker in a way. I don't know how he is as a person. I'm sure he's lovely, but in a lot of his movies, like you think about Don't Breathe, with the whole turkey baster.
Turkey baster, yeah, dude.
He likes very gross things in his movies, and there's a glee that he has in kind of putting people through just as much like trauma as possible on screen. So in theory, that's actually a pretty fun mix for if you were gonna remake Evil Dead or do your own Evil Dead. I would say don't make it. But if you were gonna make a new one, so yeah, it's a pretty good choice in terms of who you would pick. But yeah, I don't know how you feel about this one. I feel like this was pretty divisive when it first came out. I feel like it's kind of gone through a little bit of like a reclamation. I've kind of
Yeah.
around Evil Dead Rise, I saw a lot of people saying actually this movie's been great this entire time,
Uh-huh.
which I don't know if I agree with, and we'll certainly get into that. But yeah, I find it deeply missing like any kind of charm. Maybe not even. Obviously, I don't want it to just like mirror the Raimi stuff, because then it's like you're not even making your own imprint on a movie. Like, you want it to be its own thing in some sense, but
Sure.
it's so gray and like dark in terms of like color palette, and like there isn't a lot of energy to the movie, in a way that I kind of do like. Energy is like what makes the first three movies. Yeah, what do you think about Evil Dead 2013?
Uh, I have really complicated feelings about this movie. Um, I think that my knee-jerk reaction, if you're to ask me, what do you think of Evil Dead? It's fine. That would probably be my
That's how I
knee-jerk
am too.
reaction. Yeah, like on a technical level, this film is incredible.
Yep.
Like, with how it looks, the practical effects are like some of the best I've ever seen in a movie. Like, I really appreciated how this movie didn't get bogged down in like CG gore. Like,
Yeah.
it looks disgusting at points
It's
because of
gross.
how yes, it's a gross movie.
Yeah, very gross.
And it's like you go from Army of Darkness. If you were to watch Army of Darkness, then watch Evil Dead 2013, you would have whiplash, the likes of which you've never felt. Like,
That's what I did, and yes, it was very strong.
yeah, yeah, like the opening scene of this movie is like a father like burning his daughter to death after she's saying like that her soul is burning in hell or something along those lines. And I personally am somebody who, when I think of Evil Dead, I think of like the fun and goofy, campy kind of spirit that those original three movies had. Even the first Evil Dead, which, as we already have said, is much more darker and more straightforward horror movie, it still has that charm and that kind of like you said, the DIY quality to it. And yeah, it comes down to, I don't know if Fede Alvarez, even though he made an impressive movie, like it looks impressive, I don't know if he's the right filmmaker for this type of series. Even though on paper everything seems to be like pretty solid, the movie. I also think it's kind of interesting that the movie is about this recovering addict trying to like become clean, because it sets up the movie for like a really interesting kind of like people aren't going to be themselves when they're recovering from drugs, and so they might say things that are really hurtful or
Yeah.
like even at some points frightening. But I don't think the movie handles that like and lives up to the promise of that at all. Like I think the movie actually like really whiffs that
Mm-hmm.
plot line. And I agree with you that this movie like tries to do, you said this earlier, this movie tries to like make the characters like actual characters, and I think that's a huge mistake because it's like the original movies didn't do that at all, and we've talked about how it totally works in those movies, and in this
Yep.
one it's just like I don't care about any of these people at any point in this movie. Like I guess maybe Mia slightly, but the rest of them I'm just like I know they're just there to die, so just let them die. Like I don't care. Like make them as cliche ridden as possible and just deliver the stuff we want from an Evil Dead movie. So, uh yeah, I would say I land more on the positive side than the negative side with this movie, but I also don't agree with the people who are like this is the best horror remake or reboot or whatever you want to call it of all time. Like I'm like you're that you and me want completely different things with the Evil Dead franchise if that's the case. So,
Yeah, it's it's fine. Like you said, I
yeah.
agree with you. I think Jane Levy is pretty good
Yeah.
as the
She's
lead
awesome.
Deadite. She's really fun. She's definitely game as we've kind of talked about. But yeah, it is like the classic mid horror movie construction where it's like people you don't really care about have past trauma together and then like they deal with like some force that's trying to kill them. Like that's kind of like every like if you go on Shutter, and I love Shutter, but if you go on like a bunch of like you go through their like list of stuff that's like 80% of their movies, it's like, oh, we were from a broken home, or I had an addiction,
Yeah.
or like we had some falling out, and oh no, now we have to deal with this and come together kind of thing. And it's like it is very, very serious. I guess there's like, if you take the weird like sexual, I guess, bit of like some of the dialogue from the Deadites, yes, there's like a few like little chuckles in there, but this movie is deadly serious. Like
Yeah, yeah.
very, very serious.
I don't laugh when I watch this movie at all.
Yeah, I just kind of like, I want to take a shower.
Yeah, it's grimy and disgusting mostly. Yeah.
It's really gross, and luckily it's 90 minutes, like exactly.
Uh-huh.
So like unfortunately it does kind of have like that we have to set up all of these characters in the first act kind of bit that I don't really care for, because like we said, like who are these people, like I don't know any of their names kind of thing. Whereas like Evil Dead 2, it's like we're in it, like we're dealing with the monsters.
Mhm.
So yeah, it feels like maybe it's more of a writing issue for me. Like it just feels like it's just like very standard. Like at this point, like the Evil Dead franchise is like a commodity at this point. Like it is like a thing that is like part of like ingrained in popular culture, and so we have to
Mhm.
like treat this movie with reverence, and that means we can't really like not necessarily take chances, but like take a few swings with how we present stuff in this movie. We kind of have to like play it straight, just so that we, I guess, maybe appease what people, I guess, the feeling that people have of the Evil Dead movies previously, even though like this tone has nothing to do with those movies. So maybe similar to, it's a similar case to maybe like the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, which is one of the worst movies I've
Oh,
ever seen in my
this
life.
is way better than
Well,
Ghostbusters
I'm gonna land the
Afterlife.
plane. I'm gonna land the plane. I
Okay,
swear.
okay, okay, okay.
um, so
Pull
like,
a Sully. Sully, land the plane.
yeah, I might be sinking on this one. We'll see. But so like Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is an abomination, like one of the worst movies of the past couple years
Yes.
from my
Yes.
perspective. That movie is kind of all about I guess the feeling that the original Ghostbusters like creates within people with like nostalgia over years.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, like you're looking back on, like you think about like your love for the Ghostbusters when you saw it like when you were younger, and that's like the tone of Ghostbusters Afterlife. It's like a weird mushy Amblin like knockoff, and like the original Ghostbusters is about schlubby plumbers who are just trying to make a quick buck. And it's really funny.
Yeah.
like the tone is just so weird, and it's all based off of like we have to have reverence for the original. Like we can't make this new one without reverence for that. And I think this Evil Dead movie kind of gets caught in that same kind of rut. Not nearly as bad, I was going to say, because this movie is not one of the worst movies of the last decade or past.
Yeah,
like Ghostbusters Afterlife. But I feel like it is stuck in the we are remaking a very popular thing, or we are like moving on. We are adding to a franchise that is very popular and well beloved. So we have to like imbue the movie with that kind of reverence or nostalgia to those movies rather than trying to make its own thing. So that's kind of where I struggle with this movie quite a bit, because you could have taken some fun little chances here, but it very much is kind of just like a straightforward, let's put Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 together and kind of combine them, and we'll do it completely straight. And that's kind of what this movie is.
Yeah, the best way, this is my closing remark on Evil Dead 2013, because I feel like we're spending too much time on it, but my closing remark is, if I was to describe this to somebody, it would be, it's like the Evil Dead but worse. That's literally how I'd say it. Like, it's just the Evil Dead but worse. Like, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, and it's we kind of talked about how you can see the seams of the original three, and that is what makes it so wonderful. Like, we're at the point now where it's like you can't really do that now. That's like, I guess, to the average moviegoer, that's not what they want to see in a kind of movie. You can't really replicate that unless you're doing some kind of low budget, super low budget thing. Like, this is a movie produced and distributed by Warner Brothers, so you're just not going to get that same feel. So yeah, it's just, it feels like it's, like you said, it's Evil Dead but worse. It just has all like the fun little edges that I love are just kind of like smoothed off of it, and it's kind of like this like sheen of a thing that and then Fede Alvarez is kind of a sick fuck, and then makes the Vine scene so much worse.
Oh, dude, yeah,
it makes it so much worse.
It's like, stop, come on,
please go, like, please stop.
Yeah,
like that's that's so that's Evil Dead 2013. But yeah, from
take your parents.
Yeah, it's a great movie for the entire family.
To watch for the whole family.
Bring grandma in for this one; she'll love it. Tell her it's A Man Called Otto, and she'll be really excited. I still haven't seen that movie, but it just looks like a grandmother movie.
Same, yeah. No thanks. I'm good.
So yeah, from there, that movie came out in 2013, and that kind of led into something that has kind of like passed me by, which is Ash vs. the Evil Dead TV series, which I think was it Showtime? Stars?
It was Stars.
Stars. Which I know you have seen. Do you have any things you want to say about it overall? For people like me?
I'll be quick on this, just because I don't want to take too long, but I really enjoy Ash versus the Evil Dead. I've seen all 3 seasons. It was canceled, which kind of sucks, but to me that's kind of like a little bit fitting, because it's like before the Evil Dead remake in 2013 came out, we kind of like leave the character of Ash knowing that he's still like battling the forces of evil. Like, it could show up at any point and just completely upend his life once again. So even though there's not really closure for this character, I still think that it's at least somewhat interesting and thematically consistent with the other series. But Ash vs. the Evil Dead is very much the spirit of Evil Dead, which to me, it captures the spirit well, which is the really goofy, campy. Ash is kind of like the bumbling oaf once again, who is just, he somehow manages to do heroic things and be a hero. And it fleshes him out a lot more, and we have some really fun side characters throughout the show. But yeah, this is like a show that has a sequence where Ash is like in a room with a bunch of cadavers, like dead corpses, and one of them like shoves Ash's head up his butt, and then Ash's head is like through his open stomach, like you can see his
that's
face,
great.
like through his stomach. Yeah, so we're talking like that type of movie. So the type of slapstick comedy that's completely absent from in either of the two movies that have come out. So I would say it's worth a watch. The episodes are really quick; they're 30 minutes each, and all of them have like some gnarly, crazy set piece in them. So it's not a show that ever overstays its welcome, and it's really silly and ridiculous, which I really appreciate about it. So I would say that it's a good time, and it's fun to see Bruce Campbell like dust off the old chainsaw all these years later, like after, feeling like maybe he would never come back to this character franchise. And the pilot is directed by Sam Raimi, which is really cool and fun.
You've convinced me. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
It's
Season 2, I think, is my favorite of the bunch. Like season 1's kind of, and then season 2, it's like, this is great. And then season 3 is pretty fun too.
Gotcha.
So,
Great.
yeah.
Great. That sounds fun. Yeah, I'm not a huge TV guy, mostly just because I just don't have time,
Yeah.
Life's a thing, but that sounds fun. I want to check that out at some point. But yeah, we'll move on from there, which now we're kind of here to, I guess, not the main event, but the thing that brought us here on this very day, which is Evil Dead Rise, which just came out a few weeks ago. A big kind of COVID production. It's a bunch
of feel-good movie of the year.
Feel-good movie. It's just, everyone come together for a couple laughs, some cries. So this was made in I think it was made in like the height of the pandemic. It was filmed in, was it New Zealand or Australia? But it has actors that are like New Zealand, Australian. I think Lee Cronin is Irish, the director.
I think Scottish. That's right.
So it's like it's this. Yeah, he's something. So it's like this really like it truly is like I think Sean Coates, who wrote the review for the website, mentioned this is like it's like the epitome of a COVID movie where it's like let's just get people like put them together, we'll figure it out and like make this happen. And this was supposed to be an HBO Max release, and then it turned out good enough where David Zaslav made like the first good decision in his tenure as Warner Brothers Discovery CEO and decided to put this in theaters, and it's just like it's made a ton of money, and it seems like Bruce Campbell and has said that like if this movie makes like enough money, they want to keep making these things. So it sounds like this is kind of like the start of more things for Evil Dead. Whereas like it felt like there was quite a bit of a lull, at least in like the movie space, since Evil Dead 2013. But yeah, I would say this is definitely like the tone of this movie, as we mentioned with Evil Dead 13. They're very much like of the same coin. I would say this movie is a little more fun. Like I think this movie has a sadistic smirk to it, where it is knowing and kind of how like disgusting and gross it is. Whereas like Evil Dead 2013 is very much playing it straight. I think this movie has a little bit of like a twinkle in its eye when it has craziness happening. Like there's a few like decent laugh lines where it's like your mother sucks cocks in hell thing from Exorcist. It's like it's very much like what can we make this like goofy, like what thing can we say it's like ridiculous and goofy and disgusting that we can have this Deadite say. So it has like a couple of those bits in it.
If you ever want to get a good laugh at a family dinner, just use the line "Your mother sucks cocks in hell."
It's worked great for me. But I can't say like like there's like a lot of like there obviously like with Evil Dead 2013 there's a lot of obvious reverence in this movie for the original. Like you have the whole eyeball set piece is recreated in this movie from Evil Dead 2. You have The Shining, which is like just like very obvious. We have the elevator of blood opening up. But it's very technically like very well made. I think Lee Cronin's like the direction is like kind of like off the charts in this. There's like some really cool like split diopter shots that is used in here. Yeah, what did you I think this movie was pretty good. Like definitely a step up, definitely something I'd recommend. What did you think about this movie?
Yeah, I'm like starting to realize this might be a boring podcast because you and I are totally aligned like on this entire franchise. Like I agree, pretty good. Like by the way, I looked up Lee Cronin is Irish.
Got it.
And Lee Cronin, I think gets the tone slightly better than the 2013 version. Like you said, there are some moments of this movie that where I felt like, oh, it seems like it's trying to be more in line with those older Evil Dead movies.
Yeah.
And I think what it just comes down to is like I was kind of pondering this when I left the theater for this movie. And it's I don't think you can make horror movies like those movies anymore. Like
No, you
you
can't.
kind of have said this, but it's like nowadays things have to be much more dark and morose and ugly, and like the people audiences are going into these horror movies expecting something completely different. So if you walked into a movie and you got Army of Darkness, people would walk out like completely baffled by it. Like you and I would love it, but the majority of people would be leaving the theater like, what the fuck was that? Like I have no idea what to even make of that. And this movie feels much more like, okay, this is what the Evil Dead franchise probably logically has to evolve to.
Yeah.
Um, what I appreciated about this movie is that it actually tried to do something different with like the setting. It's set in like a high-rise apartment, which I think is an interesting way to
Yep.
kind of evolve the franchise, so to speak, because like I now can't complain like I did with the last movie that it's just the Evil Dead but worse. Like this movie actually is like, oh, we're gonna do something new and kind of fresh with the series. And I like the characters of this movie better than I did the 2013 one. Like I actually felt like they had like a decent dynamic. I'm not saying they're like gonna be characters I'm
Sure.
thinking about for the rest of
Yeah.
my goddamn life, but I thought that at least it had like there was some interesting stuff going on with like the dad, he left the family he's absent now, and they're like super poor, but they're living in like a massive ass apartment. It looked like a
Well, it's
massive
about to
LA
be
apartment.
condemned, so
Yeah, okay,
there's a
true.
trade-off.
I guess,
Square
but
footage for like it's about maybe it falls over. Who's to say?
yeah. But like the thing that I guess is surprising about this movie is that despite all that, this is still a pretty like mean movie. Like
Oh
some
yeah.
of these characters like have some really really upsetting endings. Like
Hmm.
I was kind of like, this is a I don't want to like spoil too much in case people are listening to this haven't seen it, but this is a movie that doesn't pull any punches with children, like
Oh
like
yeah.
sparing children, and
Yep.
I respect that, and I like admire that the movie has the guts to kind of be like, we're gonna be completely unflinching when it comes to just absolutely annihilating a child like from this earth. But at the same time I'm also kind of like, yeah, but that's not really fun to watch, and I associate this series with like being fun to watch. So the lead actress, let me look up her name real quick.
It's
I have it
Lily
pulled up
Sullivan.
here. Lily
I was looking
Sullivan.
it up when
Yeah.
you were talking.
Yeah. I thought she was a really I liked her better as a character than like the 2013 um lead character Jane Levy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Even though I like Jane Levy in that movie, I think I liked this character slightly better. Like felt like there was a little bit more to her.
Yeah, there's a little
And
more personality there.
yeah, and I thought Alyssa Sutherland was great as like the Deadite, like
Yeah,
the
she's
main
great.
Deadite of the movie.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She might be the best part of the movie, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Once again,
Uh,
just an actress who's just very game for it.
yeah,
And she's a great physical
exactly.
presence. Like she's really tall too.
Yep.
Like it just like she's like really good casting
She
for this kind
she's
of
like
performance.
she's a scary looking lady before she even becomes a Deadite to me. Like I was
Yeah.
like, oh, she's already like scary, and then she shows up as a Deadite, and she's like 100 times scarier. Like
Yeah.
so, it's just like they did a really good job picking the lady who had that horror movie
Yeah.
look
She's
to
very
her.
striking. It
Uh
works
huh.
really well. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I shouldn't. I don't mean to be mean saying she's scary, but she just has a great look for a
Yeah.
horror
Yeah. Yeah.
movie. Is
Right.
more what that's the better wording of it. But there were some great set pieces in this movie. Like the peephole set piece
Yeah. It's
was
fun.
awesome. Like I really enjoyed that. I think the bookends of this movie are completely useless, and they drag the movie down for me because it makes the events of the movie feel utterly pointless. Like, I'm not joking when I say utterly
Yep.
pointless.
Those are huge
And
studio notes.
yes,
Huge
and
studio notes.
I think that it really drags this movie down. But yeah, there I guess what I'm gonna conclude with, kind of my statement of the evolution of this franchise, is that what Sam Raimi has doesn't come in a spray bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you either have it or you don't, and he just might be the only human being on the planet who has it. You know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
is able to craft an experience that is completely distinct. And Drag Me to Hell is the best Evil Dead movie of the 21st century, and it's not Evil Dead.
Yeah, it's, like, as this, like, I guess becomes a big franchise again, or like looks like they're trying to make it a franchise again. It is kind of like what I said. It's the commodification of this franchise, whereas before in the originals, it's very much about the actor reaction to all the craziness, and now in these movies, because it's now branded as an Evil Dead thing. So now it has become about like the mayhem. Like, all the characters are basically secondary to that, even though, like, so like Ash was like so crucial, and now it's kind of like, all right, what kind of crazy things can we do, and then how do we get the characters to work around that? It's like, it's reverse engineering it in a way, because it's kind of like, in order to market these movies, like, we kind of know what people are coming to see these movies for.
Yeah.
And so that kind of creates that tonal shift as well.
Yeah, you got to have the trailer shot, the box cutter tongue thing. It's like, you have to have that type. They're built around that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it's just, that's kind of what these, like, if this is going to become a franchise, that's, I guess, like what you said, like, I guess that's like the logical shift that is made here. I am curious, because I guess we'll wrap up Evil Dead Rise in general, and we'll kind of move on to what's next for this franchise. I hope that whatever this movie was like it was like kind of like the stepping stone in order to like I guess, like, quite literally, like, mayhem is released. It's like it rises from the lake, and that really cool opening sequence, which is really, I guess, well, the sequence, like you said, makes no sense within the.
It's like well executed,
but it's well executed.
But
yeah.
narratively, it's a disaster for the movie.
And it's the title comes up as she's rising on the lake. It's really cool looking.
That's cool. Yeah, that's
really
cool.
really cool. But it seems like from here, like, this was the starting point, and now it's like the Deadites are gonna, like, let loose, and we'll have globe-trotting adventures from there. So my gut says that, like, I'm thinking of Prey, which came out last year, and how it was like, we want to do a Predator movie. How can we do it? And it's like, we put the Predator in a different location, or a different time, or a different place and time. And I think that's kind of how this is going to work from here. Whereas we'll see Deadites in, like, I don't know, some fun location, or at some point, like, I wouldn't be shocked if we had like the straight-laced Army of Darkness, where it's like a Ridley Scott movie, but except they're fighting.
Yeah.
They're fighting
Kingdom of Heaven with zombies.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. And they play it like they play it pretty straight. So that's what it seems like they're trying to do here. Where it's like, how can we, if the focus is now on the Deadites, how can we kind of put them in fun situations and build stuff around that? It's my guess. That's what I would do if I was David Zaslav, at least, and not cancel like 10 more shows.
Name it Max. To drop the HBO. It's going to be Max. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that you're probably right with that. Like, I feel like this was like I started off saying about Evil Dead Rise, it at least did the interesting thing of giving us a new setting. So it's like, yeah, you have to keep these things, like, kind of fresh. And so doing something different, like, I don't think we're ever going to get the Army of Darkness tone again.
Definitely
like, I don't think it's going to happen. Like, I think we both probably, it sounds like we both have accepted that. But yeah, it's like, at the least that I want or expect them to do is, to just maybe keep cranking out, interesting, like new kind of fresh things with this franchise. Like I'm not going to be going in expecting like 5-star movies to this, because I don't think we're going to get that. But yeah, if the next movie is kind of as different in terms of what it's going for, with like the setting from Evil Dead 2013 to Evil Dead Rise, then I'll at least be somewhat satisfied as a viewer. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel it too. Like these will be solid 3 out of 5s on Letterboxd for me.
Yep.
Kind of in that mode. They'll do like the Marvel thing where they'll take a talented horror director that's made like a small movie and like let them do their Evil Dead movie. Because like Lee Cronin made like that.
The Hole in the Ground.
The Hole in the Ground, which I haven't seen, but I know people like.
It's pretty solid. I like it. Yeah.
So I'm sure it's like it'll be like they'll look for like these like small independent movies that play at festivals, and like some Warner Brothers person like, that person should make an Evil Dead movie or something like that, and we'll go from there.
The next guys who should do Evil Dead, in my opinion, are the guys who made Mother Schmuckers. That would be the Evil Dead movie I want to watch.
The most amazing thing in the world. I talked about 3 out of 5 movies. That's like a 6 out of 5.
That would be 11 out of 10. Yeah.
Do we just go straight into a Mother Schmuckers pod from here? Is that what we do?
What happened to that movie?
Yeah, we're like 2 of like the 50 people that saw it.
I was about to say, did that ever even get released?
I think it did. I think it got like I think it just went straight to VOD. But yeah.
Okay.
For people listening, if you haven't seen it, Mother Schmuckers, great time. Very good, very, very fun movie. A little different. Well, I guess maybe not too different. I would say there's some style similarities there. I guess with Raimi and maybe the
OGs. Yeah, for sure.
Wow, didn't expect that reference on this podcast. I think with that,
I was thinking, we have to wrap up.
I think that's about time. It's like a perfect time to wrap this up if we're talking about Mother Schmuckers on this podcast. Well, thanks to everybody who took a chance to listen to this podcast today. We greatly appreciate it. Spencer, thank you for going down the Deadite rabbit hole with me today. As always, you can listen to all of our stuff on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you can find your podcast. You can read articles we write on moviebabble.com. Find us on social. You can do that. Find us, search Movie Babble, figure it out. But until next time, thank you so much for listening.